Okay, yeah. It's like the first day here. All right, good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Rabbi.
Today, I believe, is Daf Lamed in Megillah. So we left off at the bottom of Chav Testament Beis. 2 lines from the bottom, and away we go. Itmar Chaliyos V'Ata Tetzaveh. So we were talking about Parshat Shkalim, was of the Dalet Parshas. That's the first one, Shkalim, the mentioning of Shkalim. So we do it so people know about it, and then they can go ahead and bring the Machzis Shekel before the time of Nisan, so the money changers. So if the week that we reach Shkalim is during the Parsha of Tetzaveh, okay, now Tetzaveh. Now when you end Tetzaveh, basically, the reading of Shkalim is a continuation of Kasisa. So now, so 6 people read the Kriya from Tetzaveh. Kisisa until the end of the Parsha, until the next Parsha. And the other one reads basically the Parsha of Shkalim, which is just the beginning, the first part of Kasisa. And Amar Abai says, however, no, Amri no, ukbehu dekam mukmi asam. People will think, no, this is just, 7 people read, and it's just a continuation. They won't realize that Kisisa was really a new Parsha Shkalim. They'll just think it was part of the weekly portion, right? Because it's just, you just literally continue. So El Amar Abai, what does Abai say? So Karo Shisa Miyatu Tetzaveh Ad Vyasisa. You read 6 aliyahs from the beginning of Tetzaveh all the way through the end of Parsha Shkalim, which is basically like the first aliyah of Kasisa, right? And that's the first 3 views. And then the other person repeats the last part of Kisisa, or the beginning of Kisisa, to be Shkalim. So basically you read all the way till the end of Shkalim, and then you repeat the Shkalim part so people will realize that you're reading an extra portion because of Shkalim.
Well, it's not extra yet. I mean, it's still Shvi, this one.
Right.
It's not really extra at this point.
Well, right, because they had 6 and 7, right? 6 plus 1, right. So that was the machlokes between Rav Yisrael Nafcha and Abaye. So Meisvei Sachaliyos Parsha Shmuchala. So we saw earlier, if that Shkalim fell out in a Parsha Shmuchala, Bein Milchan Ben Mechra, whether it was the week before or the week afterwards, Karina Sa V'Kaiflin Osa. Then you read it, and then you repeat it. So Bishlam Abaye Nicha. This works out according to Abaye, the lashon of Kaiflin. You repeat it because he Mamish says you repeat it. El Rav Yisrael Nafcha Kash, but Rav Yisrael Nafcha Kashka. So Rav Yisrael Nafcha. I Ula Abaye Minicha. Does everything work out? Minicha. Tinach lefanela. It makes sense before it. Liacharea heikim ishchachasla. Right? But how can it be if the weekly portion is after it? Right? Heikim ishchachasla. Elamai Yisrael Neymar. It means that you could read it on back-to-back weeks, right? So over here means you read it on back-to-back weeks. In other words, so you could read Parsha Shkalim, right, on this week because you read it at the end, even according to Rabbi Yisrael Nafcha. Then the following week you also read Kisisa. So therefore, that's what it meant that you double up. Fine. Next case. Now, let's say the weekly portion is Kisisa, right? So actually, the first aliyah is the Shkalim, right? So what happens when that parsha falls out? When it's supposed to be Shkalim? So so you read from Vyasisa. Basically, you start from Vyasisa, right? Basically, we'll call from the second aliyah, even though it's not really the second aliyah, right? You start from the second aliyah. You start from here, not from the beginning of the parsha, right? You start from this, basically the second aliyah, all the way till the end. Then the last person who's going to read the Shkalim, the number 7th person, reads Kisisa ad Vyasisa. So Maskava Abaye is the same problem as Eddie. So what do you mean you're reading it backwards? You're reading 2 through, right? Basically, you're reading out of order, right? You're reading from 8 psukim into the parsha, and then you till the end, and then you read the first 8 psukim. What's going on? So rather, Abaye says differently. He says 6 people read from the beginning until the end. They read the normal week's parsha, and then the last person goes back and reads Shkalim, which is the first aliyah, and he repeats it.
There is no thing that do them after.
Right, it was the 7th aliyah. Right, according here, right, exactly.
It seems to be
right.
What we do now anyway.
Correct. So Tani Kavasi the Abaye, Chaliyos b'Chisisa. So we embrace this word of Abaye. It says if the week comes out during Kisisa, which is the parsha of Shkol, which is the beginning, Asma Konasa, the Kaiflanasa. You read the entire parsha, and then you go back, and then you repeat Kisisa. Fine. Chaliyos b'Seicha Shabbos Makdim the Shabbos Shavra. So he said, if Rosh Chodesh falls out during the week,
Rosh Chodesh Adar.
Adar, right? So Chaliyos b'Seicha Shabbos Makdim the Shabbos Shavra. You go, you read Shkolim the week before. Okay, so if let's say Rosh Chodesh Adar is Wednesday, okay, so instead of reading Parashat Shkolim on the 4th, whatever day it will turn out to be of Adar, you read it, on the 26th day of Shvat. You read towards the end of the week before, the Shabbos before, right? When you read Shkolim.
The Shabbos before Rosh Chodesh.
Correct. Right. Chaliyos b'Seicha Shabbos, Makdim l'Shabbos Shavra. You read the previous parsha. The Itvar, Rosh Chodesh Adar, Shechaliyos b'Erev Shabbos. Now, what about this case? Let's say Rosh Chodesh Adar falls out on Erev Shabbos. Okay. So if that day is 1, is that Friday? Therefore, the next Friday is going to be 8, and the next Friday is going to be 15. Now, let's see. Rav says you still read before, you still read it 6 days earlier. Ushmol Amar, go ahead and read it Parsh Shkolim on the next day, on day 2 of Adar. Rav says, you have to go ahead and read it earlier on the, on let's say the 24th of Shvat, whatever it comes out with, right? If that's the case, if you read it on day 2, so he said we want at least 2 weeks before the Shochanos come and set up their tables. So if you read it from 2 to 15, it's now a full 15 days, right? You're going to be a day short. So therefore, you have to do it before. And Shmuel Amar, you do it later. Some of the sof. Right, Chamisa. Why Shmuel say you're not going to have a full 15 days before us? He says so. Chamisa b'mali Shabbasa bikla. It turns out that what the 15th when they set the tables turns out on Friday. The Shulchanos le'nafki ad Shabbat. Right, the people the money changers aren't going to go ahead and set up on Friday their tables. They're going to wait till the Sunday. So they're going to wait till not the 15th, 16th, 17th. So you're reading on the 2nd. There's no problem. You got your 15 days there. Hilkach, therefore you can go ahead and you read Parsha Shkolim on the 2nd day of Adar and not the previous week. Right. So Tran Chaliyos. So let's look at this Chaliyos b'Seicha Shabbos. If it turns out during the week, which sounds like 1 through 6, right? Makdim l'Shavar, Mafsikin l'Shabbos Acheres, right? You go ahead and you do it the previous Shabbos, then you skip a week. So my lav afilu erev Shabbos does not mean that you go back to the to the Shabbos you read on the Shabbos before, even if it falls on Rosh Chodesh falls on Friday. The word says no loy b'Seicha Shabbos dafka. No, it only means if it's in the middle of the week. Friday is not the middle of the week. Friday is the end of the week. So therefore, if it's the end of the week, right? Shabbos is Friday is basically treated like the next day of Shabbos. So therefore, according to the Shmuel's understanding, is if Rosh Chodesh falls out on Friday or Shabbos, then you just read Parsha Shkolim then. You don't go earlier. But according to Rav, he says, no, even if it falls on Friday, it would go back, 6 days earlier, and you read Parsha Shkolim then in the last week of Shvat. So Tashma, come listen. Ezi Shabbos Rishona. What is the Shabbos Rishona, the first week that you read of the Dalet Parshas? Kol Shechal Rosh Chodesh Adar Liyos B'Seicha V'Afilu B'Erev Shabbos. Any week that Rosh Chodesh of Adar falls out in that week, even if it's on Friday. My lav afilu b'Erev Shabbos dumid the Seicha. Does not mean that it's talking about even in the middle of the week, and it says like Erev Shabbos. So Erev Shabbos is similar to in the middle of the week. Ma teicha makdimin, just like in the middle of the week, makdimin we read before. Af Erev Shabbos makdimin. So too, if it falls on Friday, we should also read it 6 days earlier. Just like if it's Tuesday, you read it 3 days earlier. So Friday, you read it 6 days earlier. So I'm a Shmuel, right? So Shmuel say no, but it says over there, but it says, how do you read it? It's the Ezi Shabbos Rishona Kol Shechal Rosh Chodesh Adar Ba. No, what's the first week when Rosh Chodesh falls out on Shabbos? You read it that day of Shkolim that day of Shabbos, and therefore, and I'll go there, right? And Erev Shabbos, so Erev Shabbos is just like Ba, just like Shabbos itself, right? V'chein Tad Devei Shmuel Ba. And so the Beis Shmuel also taught that if it falls out on Friday, and you taught this brisa, that you go ahead and you read it the next day on the 2nd of Adar, because that's not you still have the proper amount of time to read Shkolim before the Shulchan Aruch.
Well, Rav also had the Shita That
But Rav disagrees. This is Shmuel's interpretation of the Brisa. Rav disagrees. Right? Rav the machlokes of Rav and Shmuel is if Rosh Chodesh Adar falls out on Friday. Shmuel says just say it the next day, Shkalim, on the 2nd of Adar. Rav says no, say it 6 days earlier. That's the machlokes. And Rav brought a kash on this Brisa, and Shmuel deflected the Brisa, saying the wording was a little different than you're asking at me.
Shmuel is saying that whatever during the week goes on the following Shabbos.
No, only Friday. Friday.
Right.
If it falls out on Thursday, then you do it right because
That's the interpreted ba. So buzz.
No.
It's also including.
No. So it's only referring to Shabbos. So that Brisa is only talking about Shabbos. It wasn't a rule for all whatever days. It just means if it falls out on Shabbos and Friday, that's when you go ahead and you read it. That's how Shmuel interpreted it. And we actually say it's Kitanai, it's actually my close tonight. The Sargin the Shabbos is Steve Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. So it says, right. So he says that Misargin, we go ahead and we skip, right? Misargin the Shabbos. So Steve Rabbi Yehuda. In other words, they're not read. Right? They're not. There's a half second between, right? Rashi says, "Come, I'm seeking the Shabbosos." Bein Parshu Shon L'Shniya. In other words, we skip between the 2 weeks. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, Omer Ein Masai. We don't skip. And Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, Ein Masai. When is Machlokes and Omer Ein Masargin? When do I say there's not skipping? Mizman Shechal Yos be'erev Shabbos. When it falls on erev Shabbos, right? So you see, when it falls on erev Shabbos, there's no skipping. In other words, because if it falls on erev Shabbos and you hold like Shmuel, so day 2 is Shkalim, right? And day 9, right, is going to be Parsha Zachor. And then that week is Purim, right? So you don't skip any, right? But the other opinion holds what you do skip. But let's say it falls out in the middle of the week. Then if it falls out, let's say on Tuesday or Wednesday or whatever, sometime in the middle of the week, then you read the Shabbos before, right? And then when Shabbos, let's say, is the 5th, let's say, of Adar, you skip that Shabbos. There's no special reading. And then a week later, on the 12th, you read Parsha Zachor, so there is a skipping in that case. There's only not a skipping when it falls out in Erev Shabbos, and that's where the machlokes is. Fine.
Maybe they're talking about skipping after Parsha Zachor.
No, they were talking about here. This was specifically talking about this case. Right, this show. Now, the Shniya Zachor, now we say for the Mishnah, on the 2nd, right, we the second week we read Zachor, so each by Purim Shechal Yos be'erev Shabbos. Now let's talk about when Purim falls out in Erev Shabbos. So when do you read Parsha Zachor? Rav Omer Magdimin Parsha Zachor. Rav says you go back and you read Parsha Zachor before, right? You read it, 5 days earlier, 6 days earlier. Shmuel says just read it the next day. Rav Omer Magdimin ki hechidol etikdum asiyel zechira. Rav says, it makes sense. You got to read about it, Zechira Samalik, before you go ahead and do the mitzvah and read the Megillah. Shmuel Amar Machri. No, you can read it the next day on the 15th, right? Because Yud was on the Friday. Since there's places that are reading it, and the enemies celebrate on the 15th, so therefore to read the mitzvah of to mention Zechira Samalek is okay to do at the same time as other places are celebrating Purim itself.
Like in Yerushalayim, if they're going to.
Right, so that's considered to be mukafin. Now Tanan, so let's look. So B'Shniya Zachor, the second week is Zachor B'Haki Mikla Reisha Yercha B'Shabbos Mikla Purim B'Erev Shabbos. So it says over there, the second week is Zachor. And if Rosh Chodesh falls Yercha B'Shabbos, right? Mikla Purim B'Erev Shabbos, right? So if Rosh Chodesh is Shabbos, then Purim is Erev Shabbos. The Ketani B'Shniya Zachor. It says the second week is Zachor. So l'chayra, this means that if it falls out, then the second week is Zachor. In other words, you read it 6 days earlier, you don't read it the day afterwards. It just means that the second week, in other words, after the break, in other words, you take a break and then you read Zachor over there on the 15th. In other words, you don't read anything on the 8th, right? You read it all. You read Parshas Zachor on the 15th. And Tashma, come and listen. Ezi Shabbos Shniya. What is the Shabbos Shniya? This is very similar to what we had before. Kol Shechal Purim Liyos B'Seicha V'Afilu B'Erev Shabbos. What is the second week? Whenever Purim falls out during the week, and even if it falls out on a Friday, then you read it before. My love Erev Shabbos Dum B'Seicha. It does not mean that Erev Shabbos is similar to if it falls out, Purim falls out anytime in the middle of the week. Ma Seicha Magdim, and just like it falls out in the middle of the week, that you read it the Shabbos before. After Erev Shabbos, so too, if Purim falls on Friday, you also Magdim read it before. So Amar Shmuel, no, it says ba. Reread the brisa. This brisa really says Ezi Shabbos Shnia Kol Shechal Purim ba. Right. In other words, when is the second week? When Shabbos falls out, right? When Purim falls out on Shabbos, you read it then, right? You can read it then on the 14th. V'chein Tana Bishmal ba, so too Tana Bishmal taught ba, and Chal Yez b'Shabbos Asma. If, however, if it falls out on Shabbos, Purim falls out on Shabbos itself, so Amar Rav Huna L'Divrei Akol Ein Makdimin. Nobody says you Ein Makdim. Everyone agrees you read it that day on the 14th. However, for Rav Nachman Amar Adayin Hi Machlokes not so Machlokes Itvar Nami Silur Amar Reb Chia Bar Abba Amar Rav Purim Shechal Yez b'Shabbos. If Purim falls out on Shabbos, Makdim V'Karei b'Shabbos She'avra Zachor. Even Purim falls on Shabbos, Yudal Shabbos. We read Zachor not that Shabbos. We read it the week earlier. So we always, and certainly Friday, we would read it the week earlier. So according to this, the last opinion, right, you always read Zachor before Purim, even if Purim falls out on the Shabbos, or even if Purim, it's certainly right. So you read before. Zachor is mentioned before. Very good.
I don't think in our calendar.
We're going to get to our calendar. We're going to get to our calendar in a minute. Now, Bishlishi, Para Duma.
He needs one.
I got it.
Bishlishi, Para.
Thanks for doing it for the team.
I can go. All right. So Bishlishi Paraduma. Now the third week we read Paraduma. And Tana Rabbanan Ezi Shabbos Shlishis. What is the third Shabbos? Called Shesmucha LePurim. Machareha. It's the week that follows Purim. Whatever week follows Purim, let's go ahead and read Paraduma. And Itmar Reb Chanina Amar Shabbos has Rosh Chodesh Nisan. And says Reb Chanina, no, it's the Shabbos closer to Rosh Chodesh Nisan. It's not a machlokes. Rosh Chodesh Nisan b'Shabbos. So if Rosh Chodesh Nisan falls out on Shabbos, so in that case, if Rosh Chodesh Nisan falls out on Shabbos, then you go ahead and that's the case of Rab Chama. In other words, that's you do the Shabbos before, right? And ha'ikla b'emsa Shabbos. But if it's the middle of the week, then you follow then you go by the previous one. If Rosh Chodesh Nisan is the middle of the week, then you go the one following Purim and not the one before Rosh Chodesh. And Bervis, HaChodesh Hazel Lachem, and the fourth one is HaChodesh Hazel Lachem. So Tanur Rabbanan, now we're going to have a price basically summarizes everything. Tanur Rabbanan, Rosh Chodesh Adar Shechal Yez b'Shabbos. So Rosh Chodesh Adar that falls out Shechal Yez b'Shabbos. Korin Kisisa Umaftirin b'Yod. So Rosh Chodesh Adar falls Shechal Yez b'Shabbos. It falls out on Shabbos. Then we read Kisisa. We maftir the Haftarah for Yod. Bezi Shabbos Rishona. And what is the Shabbos Rishona? Kol Shechal Rosh Chodesh Adar Liyos B'Seicha V'Afilu Be'erev Shabbos. Even called Erev Shabbos. You read from before. B'Shnia Zachor, and the second one is Zachor Maftir Pakati. You read from Kati Bezi Shabbos Shnia. What is considered to be the second week? Kol Shechal Purim Liyos B'Seicha. Anything that when Purim falls on that week, V'Afilu Erev Shabbos, even on Erev Shabbos, you read from before, especially according to Rav's reading. Remember, Shmuel was the one who changed the gears of this brisa, which we mentioned earlier. B'Shlish is on the third week. Paradum, read Paradum, Maftir V'Zarakti Aleichem. And we read from Zarakti Aleichem, Be'ezi Shabbos, Shlish is about the third Shabbos, Kol Shesmucha LePurim Echer, anything that the Shabbos that follows Purim. And Berevis, and the fourth one is HaChodesh Hazeh. We read HaChodesh Hazeh, Maftir and Kol Ma'ashem Elokim, right? Berishon, Berishon Bechel L'Chodesh. That's part of the Haftarah there. Fine. Be'ezahi Shabbos Revius. Right, and what is considered to be Shabbos? What is it? The fourth week. Kol Shechal Rosh Chodesh Nisan Liyos B'Seicha V'Afilu Erev Shabbos. Right, the fourth week is whenever Rosh Chodesh is that week. Right, Kol Shechal Liyos Rosh Chodesh Liyos B'Seicha V'Afilu Erev Shabbos. And therefore, that week you read it from before that week. Now, 2 dots. So as you notice, there's a long Rashi here. Those of you at the art scroll, there is some some charts here. So basically, what Rashi is doing is explaining now that we had Eddie also pointed out before that now that we have a calendar which basically Rosh Chodesh can fall out on only 4 days. So he gives like a set of mnemonics way to go ahead and remember, right, of which days, which times we skip, right? So the mnemonics over there are Zatu, Dad, Bo, Uvio. So what's going on here? So those of you who have the chart. Right, where the chart is basically the day that Rosh Chodesh falls out, right? It tells you what Shabbos is skipped. So the first one is Dud. So dud is if Rosh Chodesh is on the 4th of Adar, Wednesday, excuse me, fourth day of the week. That right? If Rosh Chodesh is on the 4th day of the week, Wednesday, Daled, Dud, right? Then the 4th day of Adar is Shabbos, and that Shabbos is skipped, right? So if you look at that little chart there, those who have it, I don't know if you guys have a chart in the back or not. I can show you afterward, right? So therefore, that is skipped, and the other days of Adar are read, right? Yeah, fine. All right. So now let's go to Tudas. The Chamish is Chayz in the Cathedra. Now on the 5th week, you go back to the order. Now, so we already touched on this a little bit. So let's say the let's say this. Rav Ami Omar, let's say the Parshas. Rav Ami says, "Talk about the Seder Parshas. You basically took a break and then you go back." No, you don't stop reading the regular Parshas, right? And then if we only read right the Inyana Diyoma, then repeat it rather. Say Haftaras Uchayzer. And Amar Rabbi, Kvasi Rabbi Ami Mistav, it's more logical to say like Rabbi Ami. Why did we learn in the Mishnah call Mafsigin, everything we stop for? And then it goes on to the Rosh Chodesh, the Chanukah, the Purim, and Tanis, Hamadas, Yom Kippurim. And then it mentions, when else we stop, we also take a break on Chanukah, on Purim. Now, some of those things are interesting. Right? Mamados are only done during the weekday. Right, they used to say that the Karbanos have a special landing, and so as when they would have the Israel, a group of Israel, they would stand by the Karbanos, and they would be the representatives of Bnei Israel. So the Korban Tamid was basically brought by these people, because you can't just bring it for nobody, you can't just bring it for the quote unquote the nation. So rather, you bring it for these people. It's like their Korban, they're the Bailam. Now, also an easier way to look at it is a fast day. It says Tanios. Now. So you take a break on fast days. So Bishal the Seder Parsha is Hanedika Parsha B'chol. If we're talking about the Seder Parshas, so that makes sense because there is a Parsha B'chol. So therefore, you take a break on reading those, and then during the week you don't read it. So because these things only fall out, right? A tinus only falls out during the weekday. So it says you take a break on the weekday. So it makes sense that if it's Monday is a fast day, you read. You read the fast day laning, so it makes sense that you skip today and just you go where you left off, right? You don't go back. It was a Thursday. I don't read this week's parsha because it was a fast day. Next Monday, I don't go back and read what I was supposed to read. On Thursday, you just continue. But if we're talking about haftaras that you're skipping, right? Is there haftarah on Thursday? There's no haftarah on Thursday. So what does it mean that you stop and you continue because of the fast day? Fast day doesn't affect haftarah at all. So I will say no. Hakadisa. No, two different parts. In the beginning of the Mishnah was talking about Shabbosos, and during Shabbosos, when it applies, when it's Shabbos, so then you take a break from the haftarah. Right, and then you go back, you resume the regular haftarahs for that week parsha. Once you continue on. And the other opinion holds that, but when it's talking about the weekday ones, obviously it's not talking about the haftarah because there is haftarah of the week. It's talking about you just skip that day's later. But Taniyos, questions. Why is there a break on a fast day? Go ahead and Monday morning, go ahead and read this week's parsha. Right, this week read from whatever you're reading for parshas. I don't know, whatever falls out there separate days. Whatever it is, you read whatever parsha could fall out during the week of a fast. So you read that morning's parsha. And at mincha, where there's laning, you lane from the tinus. So what's the big deal? So Masaile, Rav Huna, Mitzafra, Kinufa. In the morning, no, this is what I do on fast. Is in the morning needs to go ahead and gather. They gather in the morning. Heichi avdinan. So what would they do? So Amarabai mitzaflo the yoma. So there's from the morning until the half day. Sorry. So he said right. Mitzafra kinuva. Right. No, even in the morning they would go ahead and basically lament. They would basically start their days of gathering in the morning and do having a fast day all day. So hey, what would they do? So in the morning they would go ahead and they would they would go ahead and look in the matters of the city. So why is this bad things happening to us? Maybe we're doing things wrong. They would look at what the city's doing. From the half day until the next quarter of the day. They would go ahead and they would read and they would do the haftarah. In the last quarter of the day, they would go ahead and be mispalal and would ask for rachman, for mercy. Shnamar Zapasa says, "Vayikru b'sefer Torah Hashem Elokehem reviz hayom reviz misvadim shtachvi." right? And it says they called out for a quarter of the day, and they bowed. So you see that a quarter of the day they cried out and they were asking for rachamim. They were bowing down and all that. So you see over there that this is the order of the day. So the Gemara just suggests veipuch. Anna. Maybe switch it around. Maybe they did that in the morning. Maybe it was the quarter when they were crying out. That quarter was not, one half of the afternoon, which is the quarter. Maybe that was one half of the morning, which is the quarter. It says no. You want to see the pasuk says, "Ve'ila yasvu kol charad v'divrei elokei v'divrei elokei Yisrael ad ma'al hagoyla v'ani yoshev b'sheimim." Ad leminchas ha'erev. So it says over there that on this day they would gather those kol charid, all those who were zealous, right, and they would go ahead and sit from mincha the erev. And the next pasuk says, right, M'shem ad leminchas erev. See the next pasuk says, "O minchas erev kamti mitanisi." Then I get up for my fast. And the big day ma'ali. It says up there. The pasuk says, and in the end, the episode kapayel okay shalom kai. Right. So at the end, they would go ahead and daven out. So in other words, that they would get up for their fast and they would continue to pray. So you see that this is done in the afternoon, not in the morning. So therefore, the fasting part of basically the entire day is of Inyan Diyama is of fasting. Just the morning they would look into matters, and the afternoon was the time of crying out, because that's what it says. They got up to go ahead and cry out.
So the question is still here though. Why don't they in the morning? They could have done the morning like Rav Huna.
Right. So, but the entire day, right, was set for matters of the Tanis. In other words, the first part of the day wasn't just ignore the Tanis. After the first day was they would look from the morning. They would look minyana to build mas.
The Marsh Maskana is that they would lay in the morning.
Right, because they would still be doing things in the morning because of the fast. So let's see the next Mishnah, right, which doesn't exactly line up to the way we read it. And I always have to look in the back of the art scroll of what today's reading is. I still don't know after many years of listening to Laning on Pesach and Sukkot. I still don't know when they start Kol B'chor or Shor Pesach or whatever. Fine. Now, the Pesach, Korin the Parshas Moados, Shel Taras Kohanim. On Pesach we read, right, Parshas of Taras Kohanim, right, which is Amor. But I think we only do that the second day, right? I don't think we do it. I think the first day is read because I was looking. That's how I have the. We do it the second day, right? But Chusar. So we'll touch on that. So Pesach we read, right, for Parshas Emor, where it says where the holidays are mentioned as Kohanim, Batzeres, and on Shavuos we read Shiva Shavuos. We read Shiva Shavuos, which is in Devarim. But I think we read that also. I don't think we read which day in America we do the second day, right?
First day we read
right. So right, and the Rosh Hashanah, the Chodesh Hashvi, Rosh Hashanah we read the Chodesh Hashvi, Bechal Chodesh, right? Right, Yom Kippurim and Yom Kippur, Achrimos, we read Achrimos, right? That's what I was like looking at the like wait. So beyond the Rishon Shechad, Korim Parsha Moados, and the first day, the holiday of Sukkot. Curry, we read Parshas Moados Shavuos Taras Kohanim, which is the Taras Kohanim, which is the same one as referenced before. V'shai Kolimos Hachag, B'Kovanos Hachag. That is that we read the Kovanos Hachag of which ones they brought on that day. B'Chanukah, B'Nesim. All right, that one checks off. And Chanukah we read Nesim. B'Purim, V'Yavo Amalek, and Purim we read V'Yavo Amalek. Resh Chodashim and Rosh Chodesh we read Resh Chodshechem. B'Moados, B'Ma'aseh Bereishis, the Moados. Right, we mentioned before that the Mikdash they would read from the Ma'aseh Bereishis. Taniyas on fast days, brachos v'klolos. They were in the brachos v'klolos, and they would read from there. However, ein mafsikin v'klolos, we don't break up the klolos. Ela echad kareis kulam. One of them reads all of them. And b'sheni chamishi v'Shabbos v'mincha, and on Monday, Thursday, and Shabbos mincha kari kasidron. Then we read the order of that week's parsha. But that's not part of the cheshbon. In other words, if you read the first aliyah on Monday, you don't continue there on Thursday, and then when Shabbos comes around, you continue from there. Rather, you start from the beginning. Shnamar, the pasuk says, it says, Modei Hashem el bnei Yisrael. No, it's over there, so it says, the Moadei during their times, that each one you should read in their appropriate time. So therefore, you should read the lanings that are appropriate for the day. And we'll stop here at the end of the mission. Go ahead.